Thanks for tuning in to Women Who Open Doors, a podcast dedicated to lifting the voices of incredible women in our communities who not only excel in their careers, but inspire us through their actions for others.
Welcome to a very special episode of Women Who Open Doors. My name is Jennifer Makary, and I'm so excited to be a guest host today. Our guest is Julie Cosich Collins. She needs no introduction. She is the owner and coach of KnotMagic and the host of Women Who Open Doors. Welcome, Julie.
Hello, Jennifer. It's so fun to be on the other side of this. Maybe a little nerve-wracking too at the same time, to be honest. But yeah.
I was going to say, how does it feel? It must be weird.
It is kind of weird. It is kind of weird because usually I'm doing all the prep with Hana. Well, Hana does more of the prep, but yeah, it is a little bit weird, but super excited and so great that you guys asked, that you guys wanted to do this. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. No problem. We're doing this episode because we're celebrating two big milestones. One, over 40 episodes of Women Who Open Doors, and KnotMagic is celebrating 5 years in business this year. So how does that make you feel, those two things?
Well, I'm going to try not to cry when I talk about it, but yeah, super excited. You know, first of all, I don't think when one of my friends said that I should do this from the podcast perspective, I think the first thing I said to her was, a podcast host? Are you crazy? So to have 40 under our belt, super great. And the women that we've had are fabulous. And then 5 years is just unbelievable too. It's been a dream of mine for a long time. So to have 5 years under the belt feels pretty good. Feels pretty good.
Amazing. I always say most businesses fail within 5 years.
Yeah.
So for us to be here and charting the course for the next 5 is pretty amazing. So kudos to you. And I love that you do the podcast because, you know, you're elevating some really awesome voices of people doing cool things. So yeah, I'm glad that your friend told you to do it because it's been really cool to watch. So
yeah, thanks. Thanks so much.
What has your journey been like to become a podcast host and a business owner?
Well, let's start with the podcast first because we're on the podcast. When I first started the business, I was really just all about trying to soak in advice, get people to help mentor me because I had never had my own business. I had stood up businesses within businesses and led them, but I hadn't had my own, and it's a different thing. And so I was asking lots of people for advice, and most of my mentors at the time were men, and they were wonderful and they were caring, but they kept saying to me, I think they were super protective, and they kept saying, well, if it doesn't work, Julie, if it doesn't work, you're great. You'll go back. You'll be great in corporate again. And I just couldn't even stomach the thought of not it working. So my husband, Mark Collins, shout out to him, said, go talk to some more ladies, Julie. Talk to ladies. You need some lady leaders in your life. And I did. And it was kind of my mission. And then I had a really good friend of mine, Allison Phillips, God rest her soul, because she's no longer with us, who had a podcast company at the time. And she said, you should be a podcast host. And I said, you're nuts. And she said, you'll be just fine, but bring on those ladies. So together we worked to figure that out. And I had to learn and didn't know what I was doing. But it's been one of the most rewarding things to do personally besides the business and the team, because there have been so many wonderful stories. I get goosebumps just even thinking about it because there's so many women that would say to me afterwards, I don't think I could do that. And Allison was that to me. So it kind of feels like I'm paying it forward with the team because I do not do this by myself. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Hannah. So yeah. The podcast has really just been really super rewarding. So,
and you have the radio voice. I always say you're perfect to host a podcast because even in your intro, right, you just have that, I want to listen to that person. So you've got it. You've got it.
Thanks. My mom, my mom helped that because she, when I was in grade school, said, there's this thing called forensics that you should get into in school. And I was like, what does that mean? And so I learned about forensics. I had the greatest time. Well, it was competitive. It was speaking in front of groups. It was learning stories, different. I think I had a Southern accent in one of my things that I did. Right?
Really?
Yeah. Like I had this like
That I want to hear sometime during one of our team
yeah,
meetings.
I
I
don't know
think
if
that
I
would
want
be
to
fun.
bring that back right now, but yeah, so that it taught you a lot about inflection and pauses and stuff like that. So yeah, it was super fun. But yeah, that was kind of
So
the
that was your
thing.
journey to becoming the podcast host. Now, how has your journey been for starting this business, KnotMagic?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I never say that I regret waiting so long, but it's something I wanted to do for, I don't know, probably since I was a kid. I just have enjoyed the business environment. I played, like office stuff when I was a kid. I sound like that engineer that said he played with Legos. I played office on the phone. So it's always kind of been in me, and I've always wanted to do it. So ever since I got out of college, was on leadership teams in small to mid-sized businesses and had wonderful, beautiful opportunities. But really just never, I was always working for leaders that were young. So there was never really the opportunity to kind of break a glass ceiling because they were there and they were going to be there for a while. And I just kept going and trying different businesses. So I started in manufacturing, 25 years of that loveliness, maybe about 20 years in HR and running a team. But one of my manufacturers had a wonderful opportunity to start a business within a business, brand new market, build a team. So I had a blast doing it, super hard, not the easiest thing to do, sleepless nights. But we were really successful, and I just wanted to keep doing that for other companies. And finally, when I took a break, I actually took a sabbatical for about 6 months, and I just couldn't go back. And my husband, Mark, said, an hour later, right? Like, you got to start soon there, sister. You're not getting any younger with you. So I just did, and luckily had a supportive family and lovely
That makes a big
people.
difference.
Yeah, huge. Well, right? Like, you can't run businesses without family support. So my daughter Ellie's been awesome, and so the journey to get here was long. But I know it's the right thing. I say every day I'm not going back. I've been asked to come back to companies, and I'm like, I can't. It's too much fun. No way, right? But it really is exactly where I'm meant to be right now, which is just a wonderful feeling. And if I could give that to more people, it is the biggest gift to have, to be given, to make. So yeah, it's not been easy, but it's been, like I said, one of the most rewarding things to do, at least for me.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about any hardships or challenges you came across as you started this business or early in your career that you had to overcome to really get you to the place you want to be now?
Well, I think the first hardship is just I started with nothing, meaning just me and experience and lots of great advice. I didn't take customers from a past customer or from a past business. I didn't have customers waiting in the wings when I stood this thing up. So it really was bootstrapping it financially. Didn't pay myself for a while.
Yeah.
Right? Very risky. There were a few times where I said to my family, I know I can do this, but I had a lot of doubt in the first, probably the first year of like, is this going to work? Because it just needed to get started and start rolling with sales. And I actually had a client of ours at one point say, Julie, I wish I would have had somebody tell me that it's first about selling and then hire an accountant because you don't have any money to even count.
Yep. To pay them.
To pay them. So I would tell you the first couple of years was really about taking some big risks and believing that I could have great people. And I was asked a lot at the very beginning, well, why don't you just do it by yourself, right? Just get yourself a salary, right? Everything pay back to yourself. But that was never my intention. I wanted to have a team. I get great joy out of growth. of team members. And that's where I grow as a leader. You can't grow as a leader if I'm just by myself.
You're independent. Yeah.
Right. And I needed more of that. I needed to know how to do it. So, it really was about getting customers. It was about getting, being able to figure out how much to take a risk, when to hire a person or when not. Jennifer, you were one of those people that it was a risk. We thought we had a big customer coming in, and then it didn't. And but we were still able to keep running and keep growing. And that.
So
and
glad that I was still able to be here.
So glad
Even
that,
right?
But you took a risk at the same time, right? So you have this balance of you're balancing your own risk, but you're actually hopefully inspiring enough people that want to be on board of a risky proposition. I was never like, yep, we're all good. It's good.
Totally
right?
stable, super profitable already, right? It's a startup.
Right.
So
So anybody says it starts out great like that, either has been gifted a lot of already profitable customers. But that's also where the great joy is, right? I look back on, you just asked you a great question. I look back and go, yeah, it was super hard, but it's worth it. It's really, really worth it.
Julie, you mentioned to us that you took some time off, 6 months between leaving the corporate world to before starting KnotMagic. What did you learn about yourself during that time?
Well, I learned that I had a problem with sitting still as an individual. In fact, when Mark and I had that discussion, he said to me, I don't expect you to do anything else. And I said, I've been working since I'm 13. I was like tutoring, I was helping people, I was babysitting. So to sit still and not to get value or worth from doing work was really the first piece for me of like, it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to not have a list of things to do. And I have to go back to those 6 months a lot to remind myself, because now we're growing and there's lots of things to do, but there is a moment of stillness and quietness that's really helpful. That was the first thing. The second thing was, when you get too busy, I lost contact with people that were super meaningful to me in my life. And I love to work. And so I kind of left some of those relationships and didn't nurture them, maybe. Not that I left them, but I didn't nurture them like I should or could. And so I quit and went into the sabbatical thing in like April, and Ellie was moving out of college. I think that was like her sophomore year. And so I literally spent 5 days. I went up and saw my niece, drove down the Wisconsin, Mississippi River area, like super enjoyed, just great time. And then I was super present also with Ellie, which I've always tried to do.
You gave all of your focus and energy to her because you didn't have the conflicting priorities at that time.
I think one of the things that it provided too was great clarity, because when you're quiet, you get to think more. And it wasn't an anxious thinking. It was really clarity around, what do I want to do next? And I do tell people now, if you can afford it, if you have the support to do it, and I know not everybody can do that. And it was a big gift to be able to take that time. But I just gained clarity on, no, I want to start the business. I want to have a team. These are the kind of customers that I want to have. I want to have people that I enjoy being with. And I also said to Mark, I want to give back in some way. I think he said to me something like, well, why don't you start to make money first before we start donating? And I'm like, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out what that looks like. It doesn't have to be money. So, but it was a great clarity of what the next step was. So that was super great. That I say super great a lot, but it was just really a wonderful time to be able to get clarity.
Yeah. And I always say, people, when they leave either a good or bad experience and go on to the next opportunity, there's this detox period that's required, right? Like I've lived that, where, you're so ingrained in your work and that organization you're with, that when you leave that, it's like you almost have to, it's like a breakup almost, right? Where you're like, okay, I need to take the time. So that's awesome that you recognize that and could do it, because then that gave you a way to close that door to open up a new one. So
yeah, you're right. The detox I forgot about that. There is a period of that, of just get out of what you were in, what didn't feel right. And then is almost a death too of friendships, right? In fact, I'm seeing one of those friends this weekend, and two of them, and I can't be more excited. But there was a period of like missing, like, and then I was by myself working to build a business for a little while, except I had surrounded myself. But every day it's different of like, if I'm surrounded by a team like we are now, where we're like, I get to see Jennifer, I get to talk to Jennifer. I'm on teams with, Hannah or whatever. It's different than just being by yourself. So that's
not
also
as
why
isolating.
yeah, but that's why I knew I needed the team. My body could not handle that. I would have just been miserable. So I'd much rather have a small team for a longer period of time than have me sitting in the corner of the office looking at myself like,
Right, as a solopreneur.
Not so much. Not so much.
So you mentioned that your intention was never to just be a solopreneur, that you wanted to grow a team. So how did you go about putting that team together? You've got, people that are within the walls of KnotMagic, and then you also have a whole network of resources you brought in to help, execute on the work for clients. So how did you go about intentionally building that and finding the right people?
Yeah, I think, use the word intentionally doing it. I think there was some intentionally doing it. And then part of starting a business is you have to be out of the office. You have to be networking. You have to be talking to other people, because you never know. You have intentionality in those meetings, but you never know where someone great, a partner might be, or your next employee, AKA you, even though I met you through a friend, we were at a Tempo event. So you never know when where that will come.
Exactly.
I think you also have to define. What I wanted to define early was not, and this is probably my mistake too, like I didn't define what people did as well as I defined what the values were, what I knew that I would work well with, what I knew I wanted in a team, and really the number one is it's not I, it's we. That's the biggest thing. And so I just knew that had to be the first value. So that was kind of the first thing. And then it's really about carving off. People kept telling me, because I will take it on, I will do it because I love to do it. And people kept saying, start to peel off the things that are things that you kind of dread doing next, but you have to. Accounting, right? Like I'll never claim to be, I love to do the accounting, bookkeeping. So it's wonderful. We have a wonderful resource in Chantel now, and just start peeling off things. So Hannah started because I was like, I don't want to do social media every day. I know I have to do social media. I don't want to do it. How do I get it? Ellie started helping me do some bookkeeping at the beginning. And then I had some wonderful freelancers that also came on. Jody, who did a great job with us and just helped me build some account management within the team. So it really was about like trying to first peel off what do I need to start to build, and
not
what am
your
I
necessary sweet spots, right? Like lean into what you're really good at, which is building connections, going and selling, getting teams to work well with each other and motivate them, right? Like those are, great things that you bring to the table. So giving you the space to be able to do that and parse off the stuff that doesn't make sense is really valid.
Yeah, so your financial line and your expense line will go like in waves, because you bring somebody on and, some money was getting paid out to me. And then I'm like, now I got to parcel it out. So you have to be okay with taking on debt. You have to be okay with, bringing you're swinging for the fences. And sometimes the swing doesn't go all the way through, but you still have to have that faith of like that it's coming, right? It's coming, but for me, it had to be intentional. There was some experimentation, I guess, of like, okay, is this the right, not just person, is this the right area that we need the next person? So as we got bigger, it was easier to do that, because then it wasn't just my thought. It was the team talking about, okay, what do we really need next? What do we need that complements each other too? Because I think so often leaders are like, I need a group of people just like me. And I will raise my hand and say, that is the dumbest thing you could ever do. You need people around you that are not like you, that'll challenge you, that'll, have things in their sweet spot that are different and complement. But Yeah, but
That's when great
intentional, but
ideas come
experimentation.
forward, right? When you have a diverse cast, right, you're going to get
Yeah.
different things that come up that you would have never potentially thought of.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
I can speak for myself, right, that I've gained, a great coach and mentor in you to me. But how is it that you support the team? You're constantly lifting us up. Like, what's a tip you can give to other leaders to say, this is what I do to help elevate my team?
I think it goes back to the first piece that I just said. I think you have to first recognize that you can't do it all. And it took me a really long time to get there because I feel like I should have it. And because I'm a leader, I should be able to do all of it. So I think the first step is you got to recognize that you need other people, and not just to delegate to. You need other people that are different from you. So long time ago, I did the DISC profile. So I knew who I was. Didn't necessarily like what it said to me at first. Mm-hmm. So that was the first step of like, oh, okay. But then recognizing that the rest of the team has to be different, and which will mean there'll be conflict, which will mean things won't be, like kumbaya all the time, but it'll move us a lot faster. So I think that was one of the bigger things to really, really start to figure out for myself. And I ran this Cedarburg Education Foundation for a period of time. And I would tell you it was the best leadership lesson because nobody was getting paid to be there. So I had to lead and figure out how to inspire and know that people were different without being like, well, I could fire you, because these were volunteers, right? They could walk out on me before
or the
I would
accountability piece, right? Like they can choose when they want to be accountable because there's no contract per se or paycheck that's coming, right? So that's very different.
Yeah. But vulnerability for leadership is also the key, because you have to be okay with not being the person that has all the answers. And so I think once you let go of that, it's easier to know and coach and mentor, because it's not about me anymore. It's about that person. And, everybody's got that sweet spot. I think that's the thing. Everybody's got the sweet spot. So how do we find this sweet spot?
Yeah, that's great. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And I know mentorship, obviously we do that within our walls, but that's a huge proponent and piece of this podcast. So why is it important for you to include that through this podcast?
Well, I believe in it to my core. I also, when I was thinking about the podcast, I talked to a lot of people because I wanted some advice. Mm-hmm. And actually I had a woman that said to me, just like what you said, you're really into mentoring. That could be also the hook that keeps people engaged, because they can also give a shout out to their own mentors. And oftentimes, we give a shout out to the mentor, but we don't think about why they're a great mentor. So it really became a really good story piece of, let me recognize my mentors, but, so they'll also be interested in hearing the podcast, but also there's this element of everybody needs each other. Mentorship is two-way. So there's a discussion that happens of, this person taught me this, but this is what they told me that, I taught them at the same time. So
two-way street relationship.
Two-way street. Yeah.
So people do get vulnerable on this podcast, and, Hannah gives you these questions that you use when you are interviewing people on this podcast. How do you use those questions to guide the conversation with them fluidly?
Well, first of all, I do have to say thank you to Hannah, because I don't know if the podcast would still be running, or I would just be talking to people and then I don't know, Mike, it would be a hot mess. So thanks, Hannah, because she does do a wonderful job researching it. I think my philosophy is you have to be curious. So the podcast questions that she provides are really the framework for me. But it's just like interviewing, or it's just, all I'm there is to really learn about that person and what makes them tick and what gives them great joy. And so really it's about listening to where they answer, and then knowing at least the structure and the types of questions or the things that she found, and kind of go to the next point. But a lot of times it's just about the feel of where was that person headed? Mm-hmm. Why did that, why, having the curiosity to just say, like, why did you do that? And like, I'm genuinely interested because some of their backgrounds are just fascinating of like, how did you get to be
how did you get through that? You know, usually there is hardship that these leaders have overcome to get where they are. And it's just like, oh my gosh, tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I think it's a mixture of curiosity and with the structure, because then you're just probing questions to just find out like the whys, like, why did that happen? What made you do that? Because I think that's where the meat is. The meat is probably in the second or third question down. And especially if they're willing to be vulnerable. That's why I really want guests on here that are not just trying to beat their chest about their brand. I say the most wonderful women on this podcast are the ones that really just are ready to go, yeah, I stunk at that. That was not good.
Did not. This is what I learned. I want you to hear about it so that you don't make the same mistakes or do the same thing, right?
Yeah. And you know, I mean, you guys been asking me to do this podcast for a while, and I'm like, yeah, like, okay, sure. Even this morning, I was like, oh boy. So
the day is here. We're doing it.
The day we're doing it. I know we're doing it. So no, beautiful gift. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. So with there being over 40 episodes now of Women Who Open Doors, I know it'd be hard, but is there a particular episode that really is something that stood out to you or you reflect back on that was really meaningful and had a great message?
Yeah, that's I thought you might ask me.
There's so many.
I thought you might ask me. No, I think it's a great question. I probably would ask the same thing if it were me. Probably the one that stood out is more for the emotion that it gave me. So Jerry Howes, who's no longer with us, who used to run Pearls for Teen Girls, was one of our first. And I just admired her from afar for her leadership and just her authenticity. But I didn't really, you study a person before you get on the podcast. I didn't really understand the depth of her story and the trials and tribulations that she had been through. And when she told me, she was the first guest, but it was like, first 4 or so, but she was uber vulnerable. Like she let it all hang out. We both started like tearing up on the podcast.
I remember listening to it. I'm like, whoa, I need a moment here.
I know. That's how I got off the podcast. And I was like, I think it just reflected back to me, like, this is the power of the platform right now. It's about nothing else. But like, if you have somebody on that can be vulnerable, it is not just about boasting who they are, because she was not doing that. Like, that's when you communicate to other women or other men. This is not just about women, like other people, that this, what you do matters. You can do it,
lean into it.
Lean into it, and you can get through obstacles. So again, we have had, all of the guests have been fabulous. I've not, been like, oh God, I wish we hadn't had that.
That's a hard question.
But I do think that was because I was the first one that I had goosebumps over and was almost crying. And I was like, geez, all right.
You're like, how can I continue this conversation when I need to go grab the tissues?
Right.
That's really, really hard. Yeah.
Yep.
So we get a lot of great advice on this show, as you said, right? People are sharing their stories or being vulnerable. It's not just boasting about the organization they work for, but really providing tips for people looking to take the leap. What advice do you have for women or individuals wanting to take that leap to either entrepreneurship or the next leadership role, or even leaving to go to another organization that they feel strongly in with their mission? What advice do you have for them?
It goes back to when that sabbatical I had. So give yourself a little quiet time before you take the leap, but not too long. And then don't wait, because the quiet time will help give the clarity, like we talked about, whether or not you should take the leap. And it's never black and white, but there's enough that you'll get from the universe, from whoever you believe in, whoever's supporting you. You will get enough clarity and be confident that that clarity is telling you something. And that clarity will then make you take the leap, but don't wait. Don't wait. Again, it's not a regret.
Not do it, right? The longer you wait, it's like, I'll do it next month, or I'll do it next quarter, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
And it's
makes a
going to
lot
be
of sense.
scary. It's going to be scary, but the fun comes, once you get through the obstacle that you get over.
Mhm.
And I think the advice that I got from the guys in my life wasn't bad. Like, if it doesn't work out, you tried it. I think that's the bigger thing. Did you
Yeah,
try something that was risky? Sometimes it doesn't work out. We've had, customers where I'm like, that wasn't the right customer for us. We didn't provide them the right value. That's okay. It was learning for us at the same time. So,
right.
and for me, to help like refine the place that we were headed. But yeah, don't wait. But a little quiet time goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So what's next, Julie? What are you
Mm.
excited for? What's coming down the pipeline? Like what do you want to do next? Whether it be for KnotMagic or personally or this podcast.
Well, I'm started on the board of the Exit Planning Institute. I'm learning a great deal from that group, so I'm really kind of back in that throes of what I felt like with when starting the business or starting a new job, in a way where you're like, I don't know all this content, but it really is energizing for me because it helps me help the team figure out what other ways can we help our clients that are
Mm-hmm.
in transition. So I think for me personally, that's it. I think the next is we're going to build the team more. We don't need 50 people. There's not a number attached to that, but growing the team and getting it bigger so we can help more people, because that'll also provide growth opportunities for you, for Lisa, for Hannah, for all the people that are on the team. And that's exciting because if we don't grow, then the team doesn't grow. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's super important. And then, I'm getting a little bit older. I want to still enjoy the personal times, especially with my
You
husband
have
and
to.
my
You
daughter
have
and my
to.
mom and
Yep.
dad, right? Yep. So we got some big trips that we're starting to plan, and those are really important to me. So the balance, the integration of the personal side, that's
Mm-hmm.
really important to me. But still having
Yeah.
fun. I can't do this if we're not laughing enough and having a good time.
Right. Taking the time to do our little team celebrations, get out of the
Hmm.
office, right? Like we're such workhorses. We talk about that
Yeah.
all the time that we've got
Right.
to take a pause. Let's go have
Yep.
some fun together. Obviously, we
Hmm.
have fun in the office, but yeah, that's super important because,
Yeah.
like you always say, the whole premise of this is like, if we're not having fun, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So I think that's another piece that I love hearing from you say that, right? I always have to tell myself that sometimes because it's like you
Right.
are so in the weeds that it's like, if we're not having fun, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Because life's too short to not have fun. So
Yeah.
I value that and that you spread that across our team and that kind of little motivation piece. So
Thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be, good for other people to implement too within their walls, right?
Hmm.
Because you spend so much time with your coworkers, throughout the week that
Right.
you gotta enjoy it, right? Otherwise, you're within the wrong organization. So,
Yeah. And I think so often
recognizing that to move is super,
yeah.
super important. I think.
I think that's why it's really important for leaders too. Like, we think we got to take on every customer. Not every customer is the right customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so often we take on customers because it's just about like, we got to get the money in the door, and you got to get the right ones, because if they're not good with our environment, right? If the corporate cultures don't match, I think that it hurts. It hurts the people
Helps both parties,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I even say that about the partners, the vendors. We've had a couple at the beginning of our journey, and even Jody that I mentioned, we were on phone calls together, and she was like, "I just don't think that that's the right vendor for us, and this is how it came across." And I said, "No, I don't want a vendor with us that maybe isn't the right corporate culture either. That doesn't match the values of what we're trying to do for our customers." So I think that's got to match all around, because otherwise there's going to be conflict. So during the hard times, you don't
Yeah.
want it to be hard and then just uber
Doubly
hard,
hard.
because
Yeah.
because we just don't match on visions of where we're headed, or things like that. You got to be able to work through it. So
Definitely. So I know we're always looking for guests. Like when I meet someone cool out at an event, I go and approach them and say, "Hey, I would love for you to be on this," right? So, I ask people to be on it. You ask people to be on it. Our
mhm.
team is always looking for incredible women that we can share their stories and, just learn more about them. So if the listeners know somebody that fit kind of that profile of like they're a great leader, they're doing cool things in their community, how can they connect with us or you?
Well, you can just, you can go to our website because that's where all the beautiful podcasts are, and also on YouTube. And there is a contact us form that you can use. So our website is KNOT, so KNOT-magic.com. So go there first. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn under Julie Cosich Collins, or jcollins at knot-magic.com is my email. So just reach out to me direct and tell me you have a great individual that fits that, vulnerable, giving back to the community. Maybe wouldn't be as excited to be on the podcast because they're like, what have I done? And then you hear their background and you're like, holy cow, girl. Holy cow, girl. You are the person that should be on the podcast. So, and it can also be people. So one of the bits of advice I got was to make sure that we had, diversity of thought, diversity of background, small business, large businesses, nonprofits, but someone that's leading an organization is key because we as women just forget. And, I had those imposter moments, like, why should I do a podcast? Like, are you nuts? And it's those kind of women. So we would love to have some more because we definitely want to keep it running.
So this has been an amazing time. I appreciate your vulnerability and allowing us to interview you for this podcast because you are, just like our guest, doing incredible things. And so it's been an honor to be the host. I think it's amazing you guys even asked me to do it. Just like you, right? I'm like, I can't do that, but yes, we can. Just lean in and do it. Thank you so much for your time, Julie.
Thanks, Jennifer. You did awesome. And so glad you're on our team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Are there inspirational women leaders in your life? Recommend them for this podcast by emailing me at jcollins@knot-magic.com and telling me why they're the perfect person to be featured. And please leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts to help us share these amazing women with others.